Welcome to AfLIA's 2026 Read Aloud Day webinar. My name is Sunitha Richard, and I'm the Secretary for Public Libraries, for Public and Community Libraries Committee. We are delighted to have you join us today for a conversation that is both timely and deeply important. This year's theme, Reading in the Balance, Exploring the Role of Public Libraries in the Science of Reading, invites us to reflect on how libraries support reading development using balanced evidence-based practice approaches and why this matters not just for early literacy, but for lifelong learning. Public libraries sit at a powerful intersection of research, access, community, and practice. Today's sessions will explore how librarians can confidently navigate the science of reading while also ensuring the collections remain inclusive, responsive, and reflective for the communities that we serve. Welcome. And I would like to hand you over to our dynamic chairperson of AfLIA Public and Community Libraries Committee, and she's also the Chief of Community Library Services under the Directorate of Namibia Library and Archive Services. Over to you, Mrs. Dunn.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Sunita. Thank you, Stanley and the team. Thank you for the opportunity. Reading in the Balance, exploring the role of public libraries in the science of reading. Wow, what the theme for this year's 2026 World Read Aloud Day. Good afternoon, everybody, and a happy Read Aloud Day to everybody. Today, we are not celebrating only reading, but we are celebrating with millions of people around the world this special occasion. People who are doing something simple, powerful, and joyful. Today, we are celebrating stories, voices, and connections that happen when we are sharing our knowledge or our reading sessions. Reading is not just about books, it's about imagination, it's about empathy. It's about hearing someone else's voice and realizing that stories can travel across communities, cultures, and countries. When we read aloud, we don't just read words, we bring them to life. This day reminds us about literacy as a right, stories that became bridges, and every voice that matters. Reading aloud builds more than just reading skills, it builds connections. Reading aloud strengthens listening skills and attention. It teaches us how to follow ideas, understand emotions, and think deeply about what we hear. For children, it supports brain development and helps them to become confident readers. It brings people together, sparks imagination, and allows stories to be felt, not just reading. And that is my word for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aleta, for a beautiful welcome. I would like to also welcome our two guests today. We are really honored to have them to join us. Our two outstanding presenters whose expertise spans research, leadership, education, and publishing. And I'd like to welcome Professor Ruth Hoskins. So thank you to our wonderful and dynamic presenters today. They're really outstanding, and they've been shining in South Africa as well. So we are really grateful for them to have their presence here with us. I would also like now to introduce our storyteller. As for public librarians, our program would not be complete without recognizing the power of storytelling as it lives within our communities. Storytellers are the keepers of memory, culture, language, and lived experience. Through their voices, stories are passed from one generation to the next, strengthening identity and connection. It is therefore a pleasure to introduce our community storyteller, Mzwandile Ntombela, aka Mr. Banana, who brings with him a deep connection to our community and a rich tradition of oral storytelling. Today's story reminds us that reading and storytelling began long before books and continue wherever stories are shared. And I know some of you may be wondering why I've decided to bring a storyteller. The simple reason was just to showcase what we as public librarians, when we enter a school, we don't just take books there, but we also read our stories with expression, with love, and with meaning. And sometimes we make use of our community storytellers to go in with us and make the event more exciting. So over to Mr. Banana. Welcome and thank you.
Afternoon, everybody. My name is Wandile Ntombela. I'm known as Mr. Banana. I'm a promoter for stories. Actually, I'm promoting reading and writing and also promoting libraries. Before I start, I would like to share with you just one of the stories so that maybe one of you as librarian you can see when we're doing sounds, the kids, how they'll understand and cooperate and get love of reading. Once upon a time, in Sizulu, KwaZulu-Natal, there was a cow called Sisonke. Sisonke was a bull. Whoa. It was Mr. Nduli's bull. Mr. Nduli, he got 5 sons. The first one was Ubelifa. As you know, that I'm eldest son. The second one was Uskumbuzo. He was a preach. Jesus! And the third one was Umanda, the businessman and the politician. Comrade, if you'll vote for me, you'll get anything you want. You know the promises from the politician. And the fourth one was Utamu. He was doing his study overseas to becoming a lawyer. And then the fifth one was Ukapela, a young boy who was looking after his father's cattle. One day, the news brought out, Mr. Nduli passed away. It was a sad moment to Nduli family and also in the community because Mr. Nduli was a decent man and respected man in the community. So, as in the Zulu culture, when the elder passed away, they must discuss which cow must be slaughtered. So, Mr. Nduli's son was sitting under the tree and discussing which cow must be slaughtered for their father. Perfetto. As you know that I'm an eldest son, I think Sisonke will be grateful for our bar. And then everyone was shocked. And then Skumbuzo, he stood up. Jesus! No, Peggy, we can't slaughter Sisonke. Sisonke is the only bull that we have. According my religious, if someone passed away, there's no need to slaughter an animal. And then also Manda stood up. I agree with Uskumbuzo, not in religious side, but I don't think it's a good idea to slaughter Sisonke because Sisonke is our bull. And then to Peggy, it seems like his brother against him. And then also Tabo, he stood up. No, Peggy, man. I don't think it's a good idea, man, to slaughter Sisonke, man. Sisonke is a bull that belonged to me, man. My father said to me, on my graduation party, this cow will be slaughtered for me because Begifa was very angry. He beat Tabo and everyone was shocked. Jesus! Beggy, what are you doing? We are not here to fight. We are here to discuss which cow must be slaughtered for Uba. And then also a young boy, Kapela, he asked to talk. Elder brothers, will you please give me a chance to say something? I think it will help us. Please, don't kill Sisonke. Leave Sisonke with me. And you, Putmanga, as a businessman, you can buy another cow that will be slaughtered for Uber. And then they look each other. And then Skumo said, Jesus! You see? That's why. This young boy came with the solution. So, what you say, Mandla? Mandla, he agrees. And then they bought the cow and they buried their father with peace. It's end of my story.
Thank you. That is beautiful. Thank you so much, Mr. Banana. We really appreciate you. I hope our guests today have enjoyed the story. And now on a more serious note, I think I'd like to introduce our presenter. It is really a great pleasure to introduce her as she was my professor as well at university. So with much respect, Professor Ruth Hoskins. Professor Ruth Hoskins is based in the School of Social Science at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where she also serves as a Dean of Teaching and Learning. Her academic background is both extensive and interdisciplinary, holding qualifications including a Bachelor of Arts, a qualifications audit, an undergraduate law degree. She has her Master's of Information Science and a PhD from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Professor Hoskins brings a rare and valuable perspective that bridges library and information science, education, and social development. In today's presentation, she will examine the role of public libraries through the lenses of the science of reading, highlighting how balanced research-informed practices can support literacy development across the lifespan. Her insights will help us better understand how libraries can remain both evidence-driven and community-centered in an evolving literacy landscape. Please join me to warmly welcome Professor Ruth Hoskins. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Tanisha. I'm going to initially put on my video, but then I'm going to switch it off just to conserve bandwidth. I'm quite mindful of how some of us may be struggling in some of our spaces. I'm now going to share my presentation. Thank you, everybody. And thank you so much to the team of dynamic AfLIA public librarians for putting together the webinar on a really, really important topic. Just to add, part of my background in terms of reading has been the training of teacher librarians for our basic education system. So quite a few years ago, there was a big impetus from our education library sector within basic education to put together reading programs and to develop teacher librarians who would go into the school library and put together a school library program. So I do have some background in what is happening in the schools currently, and I will comment on that in terms of where we're going. But as you can see, the focus really is on the public library and the role of the public library in adopting the science of reading, and why the public librarians really have to now push and claim their space in this particular area. And I think it's quite fitting that we're talking about this very timely topic in this period of World Read Aloud Day. So I will go and look at a definition of the science of reading. Some of us are still catching up on what this is, right? And how we're going to deal with it, how we're going to adopt the approach. And I think we need to go back to basics in terms of looking at what is the science of reading, and within the public library space, what does it mean for us if we are operating as a public librarian? We need to go back to look at the mandate of the public library, all right? And what the key role of the public library is in terms of reading, and how the public library can then align its services with the science of reading. And you're going to see many initiatives already within the public library space are already aligned to the adoption of a science of reading approach. And then how we can actually implement the science of reading. We're going to look at this in between, where do we sit? Because when we look at this literature, right, and we go and look at the research, it's really talking to educators in the school who are dealing with our early readers. All right. So where does this put us as public librarians? And I'm going to try and unpack this in the presentation today. So if we look at the science of reading, and it is the science of reading, this word science has gone in. And as soon as you mention science, then you know it's really about looking at research. And so there's been this comprehensive interdisciplinary body of research that has spanned almost 50 years, looking at the disciplines of both psychology, neuroscience, and linguistics. So it's all about how the brain, is enabling, all right, reading through linguistics, And how do our readers then develop, and what is the best way to help them with reading, okay, and developing their reading? So what's highlighting is that reading is not just a standalone, innate, okay, activity. It does require explicit, systematic instruction in those foundational skills like our phonetics, our phonemic awareness, as well as the comprehension to achieve proficiency in reading. Let me move to my next slide. And so what we've seen is what we termed in the literature is the reading wars. Now, the reading wars is just the two core approaches that we've had in terms of reading development. The phonetic-based instruction fits in with the science of reading, and its predecessor, called the balanced literacy approach, right? Use a different approach to developing reading. And so the science of reading really focuses on a structured literacy approach that is evidence-based. And children are learning step-by-step phonetic lessons on how to accurately decode words. So this ensures that they're actually learning the technique of reading without relying on guessing or picture association. Now, this was an approach that the balanced literacy, okay, used to actually adopt. So balanced literacy, which is a former approach, assumes that the reading is a natural skill and that our children will eventually understand it through absorption and exposure. Okay? And the problem with this is if we look at some of our early readers who struggle with reading, we find that balanced literacy approach does not help them. Let's take, for example, our dyslexic kids, right? And other categories of kids who are struggling with reading, our autistic kids as well. The balanced literacy approach, therefore, does not help those categories of early readers. So the approach then is to migrate to the science of reading, because the science of reading really is for our children to read automatically and fluently. And what it does, it sets the stage for comprehension skills. And then ultimately, the approach is backed by evidence-based scientific research on how the brain learns to read. So the science of reading, very important within our African and our South African context, is an approach or movement that is about equity. It's about readdressing equity and ensuring that nobody, okay, will be hampered by the approach we adopt to teach them the reading skills. So when we understand how our readers are working in the brain, what's going on in our kids' brains, we can make sure that all our students, regardless of the background, the learning style, all right, and what they're coming in with, they will get access to the instruction that actually works. So where does it leave public librarians? Because the focus really is on the school and educators or teachers who are responsible for teaching language. All right. And if you go and look at the literature, the focus really is on the schooling system. All right. As well as how parents can be facilitated to help their children with the development of reading skills. However, the public librarians are now sitting in between, right? And hence the title of this presentation. And the reason they're doing that is because as public librarians, we know we're not teachers, okay, and in the classroom, nor are we teaching a structured scope and sequence of phonetics, right? Nor do we as librarians even have the ability to track our users' reading progress, okay? So simply put, right, we are not in the schooling environment. So where does this leave us then in terms of the science of reading and our core mandate and role as public libraries? And so the answer to this overcoming the in-between is going back to what the mandate of the public library has been. And simply put, if we sum it up, public libraries, as we know, serve a vital, okay, the services are vital, they are often free, okay, and they're equitable hubs for promoting literacy, okay. And they're about offering diverse reading materials and fostering lifelong love of reading across all groups and backgrounds. So the aim of the public library is about supporting, encouraging, and cultivating reading habits by providing access to our reading materials like our books, our digital resources, our literacy programs, and our quiet spaces. And I'll talk more about what I mean in terms of these core services. So as you can see, by its nature, the public librarian is key in the science of reading. Let's examine then the key roles and flesh them out in more detail of public libraries, because we need to expand on them to see how there really is no in-between for a public librarian if we're going to be adopting this approach. So public libraries, as we said, they're central hubs. They promote a reading culture. They provide the free access to diverse literature. They foster literacy through their specialized programs. We'll talk about some of those programs in more detail soon. And they offer this welcoming space for all ages. And by doing so, they are stimulating intellectual curiosity. They support lifelong learning, and they cultivate reading habits through, for example, storytelling sessions, book clubs, and library events, and numerous other activities that can be included in terms of the public library role. So let's focus then on the role of the public library in reading. And if you're a public librarian, instantly you would identify with your role in terms of reading promotion. So in terms of promoting literacy, the public librarians are offering structured programs and materials for all ages, including families and adults, to develop and improve reading skills. By providing equitable access, and we know our Southern African context is so important, leveling the playing field, okay, that free access to the literature, the reference materials, and the digital resources, they remove some of the financial barriers to reading that often exist. I mean, the average early reader comes from a household where there is simply no money to purchase reading materials, right? The supporting of lifelong learning, where libraries provide resources for self-directed education, so important. And they help individuals stay informed and develop new skills at their own pace. And then finally, both the digital and the physical access now, the public libraries, they bridge that digital divide by providing access to the ebooks, the audiobooks, and the computers, access to the internet, alongside the traditional print materials. So just unpacking what libraries have been doing, public libraries have been doing all along in terms of developing reading and enhancing a reading culture, you can see by the nature of the services that have been offered that public librarians are going to be key in adopting and implementing the science of reading. So public libraries can shift the balance, right? And the way they can shift the balance is by aligning their services with the science of reading approach. So how can they do this alignment? So public libraries, as you know, have increasingly aligned their services, especially for the early readers, their children's services, with SOR as a research-based approach by emphasizing the explicit, systematic instruction in foundational skills like phonics and decoding, by offering the decoding books and resources and evidence-based story time. Library support literacy beyond traditional methods, and finally, helping children connect sounds to letters for long-term proficiency. So this, if you're a public librarian here today, you can already identify with what has already been happening in your space. More importantly now, how can public libraries implement SOR? So there are key ways in which the public libraries can implement the science of reading. The first starts with collection development, the curation of your collection, right? And libraries now must expand their collections to include more decodable books, which will help our early readers practice specific phonics skills without relying on guessing. That's the first one. Two, we have to now have targeted programs, right, that adopt the approach. So our story time and after school programs have to incorporate phonemic awareness and phonics activities. So for example, your sound blending games, rather than just focusing on reading for fun. And then supporting the early reader, so important. Parents are so important, right, in reading development. So supporting the caregivers, such as your educators and your parents. Now, having said what I said earlier about working in the space of basic education, it is very clear that very few of our schools have adopted the science of reading approach within basic education. So there is a very important role for the public librarian to increase the awareness around the benefits of the science of reading approach amongst the schools that they are collaborating with. In all the programs that the public librarians are running, the reading programs, it's going to be very important to foreground the science of reading when you're interacting with the learners who are part of your school collaborative approach. So educating the parents on evidence-based reading practices such as decoding that really must replace the older, less effective methods that we spoke about when we touched on the reading wall. And then coming back to equitable access, which is so important, we have to ensure that all children, regardless of the curriculum, right, have to have access to materials that foster foundational, sufficient reading. And you do know that to amend the basic education curriculum takes a while. All right. So we do have the work cut out for us as public libraries. The partnership with schools, I've alluded to this earlier now, that libraries have to align with our local schools and we have to adopt SOR and we have to ensure consistency in terms of that literacy support for children in our community. So my presentation is not a long one today because I really wanted, if possible, some discussion time. And the merits of us adopting SOR in our programs as public libraries is going to be vital. So this would highlight the critical and the proactive role that public libraries play in fostering not just a love for reading, but essentially an evidence-based skill that is required to become a skilled reader. And then, before I say thank you, I want to ask pose a question, and it's a take home for those of you here who are public librarians. So, how will you be enhancing the implementation of the science of reading in your library? What are you going to do different now, okay, in terms of moving forward, noting the core benefits? And you can no longer say that you are sitting in between, all right? When you realize that the core mandate of the public library is exactly that in terms of enhancing reading development, right? What is going to hold you back now in terms of getting your programs aligned, in terms of ensuring that you are supporting, okay, the support for an extended visa, in terms of how you're going to do your community engagement, okay, and your outreach and your collaboration with your school in your particular area. I also want to say one thing. I'm so excited because I was reading through the chat before we started the webinar, and some of the authors whose work I was reading through are actually present in the webinar. So I want to give a shout out to Millie. Thank you so much for the phenomenal work that you're doing in this area. So there are quite a few experts here already on the webinar, and that is so fantastic to meet you here on the webinar today. My last slide is just a couple of readings that are being consulted, and Millie's is the first one, which is a co-author there. And I really want to say thank you to the AfLIA team, Public Library team, for inviting me. Thank you so much, and I hope now that the impetus will grow and we will move to the adoption of the science of reading in our public library space. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Professor, for laying such a strong foundation for our discussion. And yeah, we are open to our guests if they have any questions for Professor Ruth Hoskins. You may just you could either type it on or you could ask them directly. We have enough time.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. You know, I listened to you, and so I want to express my appreciation to the Prof. You know, honestly, I never thought of it as science of reading, but you know, the way you presented it, you know, I just saw that it could really be a scientific process, you know, and there will be verifiable steps or clear steps on what to do at different points as you're teaching children learning. And you also said this important thing that really rang in my ears. You say that libraries are not schools, you know, that we don't have that structure to do some things as teachers, but libraries can still inculcate that love for reading. But I have a problem somewhere because I took pictures of your slides, and that slide where you talked about the key roles of public libraries, you know, providing diverse resources, literacy and education support, engaging creating engaging environments, community outreach and campaigns, and then ensuring access for all. I am trying to find out where can we fix this issue of I don't want to use big grammar, but I have to use it. Where do we put in this slotting this aspect, this thing about epistemic injustice, whereby, you know, children are taught to read in languages other than their mother tongues? And this is well, not peculiar to Africa, but in countries where colonization happened. You know, I thought that that one of the key roles of libraries should also include how can libraries help children, especially the little ones, to be comfortable to learn or to read in the languages that they are used to, maybe before they go to school and so on. And even if they go to school, I know that in South Africa and in some other countries too, that their recognized local languages that children can learn in. That's for language of instruction, especially for the young ones. So how can libraries fit into this? And why I'm asking this, sorry for the long thing, why I'm asking this is that AfLIA has been flowing along that line with public and community libraries in Africa to let them understand that please make room for this, make room for resources in local languages, make room for reading stories to children in local languages in their mother tongue. So I'm just wondering, shouldn't it be a part of the role of libraries? Sorry for the long question there. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you, Kim. I think I couldn't concur with you more on mother tongue instruction and the facilitation of reading using mother tongue. Within the schooling system, the basic education system in South Africa, there's lots of literature and research that has been done that shows that children who do the foundation phase in their mother tongue, okay, are better learners by the time they move on to a higher stage of learning. So the point you're making is so crucial, right, around mother tongue, the use of mother tongue to develop a reader. In the very early 2016 already, the Education Library and Information Technology Services year for basic education in KwaZulu-Natal were already looking at this issue of mother tongue instruction within the reading program. All right, so we were skilling the teacher librarian to say, in your reading program for your school, you must ensure that you are utilizing mother tongue, okay, as a medium to actually develop reading in that reading program. And the same could be applied across all of those activities that you mentioned, all right? Storytelling, story time, every single one of them, all right, needs to adopt the mother tongue approach. So it's not foregrounded in my presentation, but I think it is worth taking up within the public library sector. Unfortunately, I don't have enough information to comment because this may already be happening. Sunita could tell you, that this is something we're already doing in our spaces in terms of reading development. So if it's about equity and ensuring that our kids get the foundation that's going to help them and that they adopt mother tongue, okay, then I think it's a key element that must go together with our approach to SOR, especially within the context. We know our context, the language of instruction is often not that of mother tongue in many of our basic education schools. So this really, the confusion it takes for somebody who's in their foundation phase, okay, is also problematic. But that should not deter the school librarian or the teacher, okay, or the public librarian from ensuring that our programs are inclusive of a mother tongue approach to SLR. Thank you so much for your question. Okay.
Thank you, Prof. I just have a question of my own that I would like to ask. What skills or knowledge areas should librarians prioritize to remain relevant and effective contributors to lifelong literacy in the coming years? I know that's something that we are all worried about with technology taking over.
So isn't it interesting then, Sunita, that, and I'm looking at this from delivering, not from training librarians, huh? That we took away these basics to focus on the metadata issues. We want metadata librarians, society wants digital librarians. So in the public library space, right, we did in many of if you look across the board at the offerings to train librarians and public librarians, we neglected the core around reading development enhancement. For me, what skills do librarians need? We can develop these skills, but through these short courses, and there's going to be a need for that. Now remember, we are not trained to teach, all right? This is another point. But if you look at the BELA standards, the Council for Higher Education approved BELA standards for training librarians, there are competencies and skills, soft skills within there that says that our librarians must have teaching skills. Because how do you deliver a literacy program without having those basic teaching skills? Now, we are not language teachers. Let's be clear on that, right? So we're going to have to decide what is our role. If the language teacher is going to be adopting this SOR, then how do we align? What do we provide access to, right? How do we make sure that the approach is supported from the perspective of the library? And it does mean that, yes, there will have to be capacitation, training, and further development, right? And I don't want us, it's not our role to be language teachers, right? Let's make it clear now, that's not our role. But how do we, from the public library perspective, facilitate SOR? So yes, if this approach is coming, I'm a firm believer that if libraries and librarians, whether they're academic or public librarians, because I work a lot in the academic library space, the evidence-based approach means that you're going to have to adopt some sort of research approach, right? To whether your programs, are hitting the mark, for example. So the training and the development and the capacitation now does shift, and you rightly pointed out that we need some core basic and some basic skills around how we're going to implement services that are facilitating SOR within the public library. Thank you, Sunita.
Thank you, Prof. You've just, your whole presentation is key for me because of present. I've just been called in by one of our primary school principals. And South Africa has implemented the Drop Everything and Read program, which entails 30 minutes of reading time to be incorporated during the school schedule. So excellent. Thank you so much, because it puts me in perspective as well to know exactly where to hone in on and what our purpose at the school will be. Because he wants us to come on a Wednesday and start with grade 1 to grade 3. So thank you. You've actually answered what I was looking for, because I was conflicted. Because as you said as well, that we are not the educators. We do not want to take on that role. So thank you so much. You've actually clarified it as well. Thank you, ma'am. Is there any other questions?
Thank you very much. I appreciate Virginia Piri from Zimbabwe. I'm a writer for both adults and children, but currently I really take it seriously on the children's literature, being on International Board on Books for Young People, and that has been going on for a long time. I'll take the Zimbabwean situation on local languages in public libraries. There's a big problem because most so-called really people who have a bit of money and all, their children do not speak local languages at all. And those who speak local languages at home cannot manage to get to libraries because of distance, of time, and many other issues. So the situation here is, it is actually unfortunately affecting mostly the children on both sides, those with money and those who are actually downtrodden families. And the local languages are dying. Currently, I have a campaign where I've asked a lot of writers, including myself, to get the children's little books. It doesn't matter how small or how big, and we get them into libraries. We have a campaign because as far as local languages, they've died. Absolutely. And I don't believe in certain schools also they're a priority, especially for children, because if we don't do that, they are the future, and that's the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Virginia. And I think it sums up the discussion we were having earlier with Kim. I think as African public librarians, we have a key role to play that we get out, that we have that collaboration with our network of public schools, both within, the metros, but also within the rural areas. So, we have our work cut out for us, but as public librarians, that is our mandate. So, it's maybe some topics that you, the senior from the public library grouping can take up for future webinars, because I think it's a really interesting topic around what we're doing with our local languages versus, languages that are the accepted norm. And I concur with you. More needs to be done by all sectors. And it's really interesting that you're coming in from the publishing sector, because there's a key role for you, as you said, as local authors, to continue publishing in those local languages and making that material accessible so that our early readers can actually read in their mother tongue. Because the evidence is there that if they learn to read in their mother tongue, okay, bar the language of what the mother tongue is, the skills that they learn, all right, are going to help them even with the reading of non-mother tongue literature. If you look at how reading, happens. So that is so important. And alongside this, right, the approach, I think so much more can be done to enhance reading. Thank you so much, Virginia.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Hoskins. Thank you for an insightful presentation. We now close off. So in saying that, we would like to conclude our AfLIA's 2026 Read Aloud Day webinar, and we extend our sincere appreciation to our presenter, Ms. Hoskins, Professor Hoskins, and to Mr. Nzondile Ntombela, aka Mr. Banana, for his efforts, and Professor, for your insight today, and we really appreciate it. We thank you. Yes, so today's discussions have reaffirmed the vital role libraries play in advancing a balanced, evidence-based, and inclusive literacy for all. And I would like to call upon our Vice Chairman, Mr. Lawrence Akumo. He is also the Chief Library Officer at the City Library, Wuse Zone 4, Abuja, Nigeria. I call upon him to do the closing and the summary.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I think it has been a very busy day. We thank God for what have happened today. At least the public and the community library section have celebrated the 2026 World Read Aloud. Flashback to how we started. The welcome address was taken by the chairperson by the name Miss Alita, and she did spare her words by welcoming everybody on board, especially all the participants. He highlights that reading aloud is a powerful tool for building literacy, deepening knowledge, fostering the imagination, and connecting people across cultures and languages, encouraging stories that inspire bright futures. During our icebreaker, we engaged our brother from South Africa, Ntobela Eke Banana, who inspired us with a powerful story centered on KwaZulu culture. The story was so fascinating, so interesting. Ntobela Eke Banana, we greatly appreciate you. In the first paper presented today by Professor Ruth Hoskins, titled Reading in the Balance, the paper explored the role of public libraries in the science of reading. Her paper also mentioned or contributed to the reading development through the lens of the science of reading and why balanced evidence-based approaches are essential for lifelong literacy. Professor Ruth Hoskins is a lecturer from the University of KwaZulu. In her parting remark, he challenged all the stakeholders on how do we implement the science of reading in our life. In all honesty, I think we've come to the end of 2028 Read Aloud program. And on behalf of the public and community library, I want to appreciate the Executive Director, Dr. Helena Asamonye, who have been who have been taking care of AfLIA in all ramification. I believe without her approval and steadfastness, this program will not be possible. And I want to thank Doreen and Dr. Nkem, who have been always there for public and community life, and some of AfLIA members like Stanley and those who are working behind the camera for helping and directing the team of the public and community library to bring this thing to bear. On this note, I would say that we have come to the end of this program.